Okay, so we go to infant, and then a little bit of historical perspective first, so before I start this up. When the servo first came out, we didn't have non-invasive on it. It just came out as an infant or adult invasive ventilator. Then, I think in 2003, we came out with non-invasive. And when non-invasive came out, then you had the option of picking invasive or non-invasive depending on how you were going to ventilate a patient. So at that time, when non-invasive came out, NICU people were really excited because they said, great, we've got a ventilator now that can really help us ventilate non-invasively those kids, because you got non-invasive and you got the infant range, so it's going to work with the kids. And we said, hold on just a minute. Let me define non-invasive as it first came out. And non-invasive, when it first came out, included non-invasive pressure control and non-invasive pressure support. Thank you. Push that in tight there. Those two modes. Now, and they were intended or designed to work with 3 kilogram, down to 3 kilogram babies. Okay? So they weren't, those two modes were not intended to be used on kids less than 3 kilograms. So when we first said it in that way, people went, damn, I mean, that's where most of our kids are, 2 kilograms or maybe even 500 grams that we want to do non-invasive ventilation with. So what are we going to do now? So they had the non-invasive, so what they did was people tried to use non-invasive in that, the way they came out and the way they still are, with those two modes, non-invasive pressure control and non-invasive pressure support. So let me explain what happened. So ideally, when you go to non-invasive, what you're looking for really is, in particular, that the kids are breathing, right? They're breathing, so you're providing support to them. It's not like, oh, this kid's apneic, so let's put him on non-invasive. I mean, if he's not going to breathe, you have to intubate him and put him in control ventilation, generally speaking, right? But if he's breathing and you don't want to intubate and you want to provide support, you say, well, gee, it makes sense to use pressure support CPAP mode, and we can add a little pressure support, or we can just keep them on CPAP. So that being the case, we see those 4 modes there, but initially what was available was just NIV pressure control and NIV pressure support. So in choosing the logical mode for providing support, we pick non-invasive pressure support, and we say, well, gee, this is nice because we can set maybe, a couple of centimeters of pressure support over and above the CPAP that we set, so they get a little bit of a puff of air through the prongs, right? And we have PEEP, we have FiO2, we can adjust, just like in pressure support invasive, we have the ability to cycle the breath off, which will help us deal with the leakage that may be occurring with non-invasive ventilation. Okay? So in every pressure support mode, whether it's invasive or non-invasive, we have that button there that says inspiratory cycle off. Now, what this button is for is that in an assist control mode, like pressure control or volume control or any invasive control mode, you have an I time associated with the delivery of the breath. So the ventilator knows that we're going to deliver this breath at this point in time, whether it's a triggered event or it's just a timed breath that's being given. But I'm going to deliver this breath, and I'm going to deliver it in the baby's case for 0.4 seconds. At the end of the 0.4 seconds, I'm going to turn off. The ventilator says, I don't care if there's a leak in between that time, because I know when I'm turning on and I know when I'm going to turn off based on the I time that's set. But in a support mode, a pressure support mode in particular, the ventilator is triggered by a trigger event. It's not triggered by time, right? It's triggered by an effort. So once the ventilator is triggered on, right, now the ventilator is delivering a certain pressure support, whether it be 1 or 20. And so the ventilator now has to know when to turn itself off, right? There has to be some way to turn it off. Since there is no time that we set in a pressure support mode, there has to be some other criteria that the ventilator uses to turn off the breath so that the patient can more comfortably exhale. Now, we've probably all seen adults, in particular, because it's easiest to describe an adult, but it happens with babies, where let's say a cuff is down. and we're ventilating invasively and pressure support, so the guy triggers the ventilator on, but because he's got this cuff leak, what happens is you walk into the room and the guy goes, "Hey, turn this ventilator off, what's going on?" And it's the ventilator keeps blowing gas into his lungs, but it's going out over his cord so he can keep talking to you, right? And you go, how can he be talking to me if he's intubated with, and you know that the cuff is down, but what's happening is the ventilator just keeps on. Now there's backup criteria that says that I won't let the ventilator run for any more than 2.5 seconds in the adult range, and it's 1.5 seconds in the infant range. But what happens is it just keeps blowing gas in because it didn't hit the criteria for termination. Okay? So the way we deal with that is with this button called inspiratory cycle off. So when we breathe, whether we're breathing naturally like we are in this room or whether we're on pressure support on a ventilator, the way we start is we start at zero flow, we breathe into some peak flow, and then as our lungs fill, flow diminishes until for an instant we're at zero flow again, and then we exhale in the opposite direction, right? So flow rapidly increases to some peak, and then it decelerates naturally. That's how we breathe, that's physiologic, right? So when we're in pressure support, the ventilator provides support the same exact way. It delivers the breath to some peak flow, and flow will slow down as our lungs fill. Now, what inspiratory cycle off is the ventilator then, when we breathe in on the ventilator, when we get to whatever peak flow it was that we pulled in, the ventilator will note that, and let's say in this example, the ventilator sees that I pulled in to 50 liters per minute. In a baby's case, it may be 5 liters per minute or 4 liters per minute, that was his peak flow that he pulled in at. When the flow then diminishes to 30%, in this case, to whatever the peak flow was, the ventilator then will terminate the breath and go to exhalation. So in this example, 30% of 50 liters per minute is 15 liters per minute. So when the flow gets to 15 liters per minute, the ventilator terminates the breath, and now I can comfortably exhale. If it didn't, I would be exhaling against that flow that comes in. It's not like I couldn't exhale, but it's like I'm exhaling into a hurricane, right? So that's 30%. Now let's say I set the inspiratory cycle off at 70%. Well, I pull into 50 liters per minute, and then at 70% of 50, that's 35 liters per minute. The flow only has to diminish to 35 liters per minute, and the ventilator will cycle off. Right? So I can set this wherever I want, but under perfectly normal conditions and normal circumstances, technically you would want to set it at like 1%, because the way we breathe, we pull in until our flow is zero, so we don't want to tell the ventilator to turn off until our flow is way down here, right? So with an adult, I might want to set this number at 5%. So I get a nice deep breath. I'm allowing the patient to pull in for as long as he wants. Flow goes to zero, he's nice and comfortable, and I'm not cutting him off. I'm not robbing him of any flow that he would want. However, if he's breathing very fast, or in the case of a baby that's breathing very fast, if I, in essence, force him to take that deep breath, then when he exhales, he may want to take another breath before he's fully exhaled. So consequently, if the I time, in this case, is too long, we may have some air trapping going on because he's breathing fast. So I can combat that by turning my inspiratory cycle off up a little higher, so I would terminate the breath sooner, which would allow more time for exhalation to occur. So I can use the inspiratory cycle off for that reason. If I thought the baby was breathing too fast, I could set the inspiratory cycle off at 30% or 40%, cycle the ventilator off sooner, and this is only in pressure support or IMV pressure control with pressure support, because if the IMV breath is taken care of by your I time, and then the pressure support breath is taken care of by your inspiratory cycle off. So you can adjust it to help you with comfort. You can adjust it to help you with eliminating some auto PEEP if the respiratory rate is too high. But the other thing that you can do is, in the event that we breathe in and you set the inspiratory cycle off, let's say at 30%, but I breathe in, and now it's, and the flow never diminishes to that point, well, the flow will keep, you know, coming out, and I'll be doing this, hey, turn this ventilator off, how come it keeps running? Because it never got to 30%. So if I notice that, and I go, well, I can't put any more air in the cuff because something's wrong, or there's too much pressure, or whatever, and I can't do anything about it, all I would do is increase the inspiratory cycle off up until the guy is going, hey, and the ventilator cycles off, and I can exhale nicely, and then I trigger it again, and I say, hey, and I can only get hey out rather than hey, what's going on with this ventilator, because the ventilator cycles off, and now I'm exhaling appropriately. So you can adjust the inspiratory cycle off to deal with your leakage, particularly when you're dealing with prongs or the mask, and when you have a fussy kid that has his mouth open and some of the flow is leaking out through the mouth, and the ventilator isn't cycling off appropriately. Okay. So you all follow me on that? So it's a helpful tool, particularly in non-invasive applications.